Thanks for watching HCAM TV. Did you know HCAM operates 3 channels with great local content? Tune into our public, educational, or government channels at the following locations. A full program schedule and video on demand are available at the HCAM website at hinghammedia.org. Thanks for watching HCAM TV.
This is a great event to celebrate the soft opening of the Hingham Heritage Museum. The building is fundamentally complete, so we thought it would be an opportunity to do 2 things. One is to welcome members of the community, open to the public and so forth, and also to celebrate the generous contributions of the project management team. Sally Weston as designer, Mark Cullings as project manager, Mike Studley, Peter Comrack as their support team, and Peter Brannigan, structural engineer, and Sean Papish, landscape architect. The Hingham Historical Society is a private group of citizens dedicated to preserving the history of Hingham. We have really 2 components, I think. One is the archival component, where we have archives filled with Hingham artifacts, which we exhibit from time to time. And the second is the living history component, which we honor through the annual house tour.
This is the culmination of many years worth of work by a lot of people. Back in 2008, we began talking about this building, Old Derby Academy, and what it meant to the Historical Society. And it was a revenue generator for the society. And it was not in disrepair, but it had not had attention in many, many years. The society had owned the building since 1965, and there had been a renovation in the early 1970s, but up until 2008, not very much else had been done. And when Suzanne Buchanan, as the first executive director, came into town, she saw the potential for turning this building into something more than what it had been, which was just a building for functions. It was closed most of the year and opened when there were rental functions. So it was her idea to move her headquarters office into the building, and to move the gift shop from where it was in Old Ordinary on Lincoln Street in here. And we immediately began getting foot traffic. And we immediately began getting people asking questions about where their ancestors might be buried in the Hingham Cemetery behind the building. And it just gave us new life. And the building continued to be rented, but it wasn't handicapped accessible, and it didn't have air conditioning, and it had been outpaced by facilities like Red Lion Inn and others, Black Rock, that were much more up to date. So the question became, we need to take a look at making this building one that's a 21st century building.
We're having an open house to celebrate the opening of the building. It's been closed for at least 2 years. We have built this entire end of the building so that we can have our collections and our textiles and our archives stored and installed properly. This is a work in progress on the installations, but we wanted to celebrate the people who really brought this to fruition. They're amazing volunteers. For me, I've been here 2 months, and they have been absolutely amazing, but they've been here for years doing this. It was built in 1818 as a result of work by local woman Sarah Derby. She wanted there to be really strong educational opportunities in the town. This building was built in 1818. It's the first co-educational school in New England and the 3rd one in the country. In 1818, boys and girls both came to this school, and they were taught separately, and they had separate entrances, but it was a co-educational institution, and they were taught.
Our first step in 2013 was to design and build the staircase on Main Street. The only way to get into the building was to walk up the driveway. The old staircase had been buried because it was a hazard. And again, Sally didn't sign up for this, but she stepped forward, and with Peter Brannigan and the late John Riley, they designed and built the monumental staircase that we know today. And John Riley, unfortunately, we lost him a year and a half ago, but he hand-selected the stone. He found the stone in South Dartmouth in a field that would match the stone that was in the wall out there that we see. So the idea was, his vision was, and what we benefited from was that this staircase would look like it had been there forever. And it does. And it was a wonderful project. That got the public's attention. There was something going on the hill. And when the staircase was done and we began raising money, people now were paying attention to what the Historical Society was doing with the Old Derby Academy. And then we began the building project next. And the building project began in 2015. We still have some punch list items to do, and there's some landscaping to do, but essentially the building is done now.
I know they did an archaeological dig, an investigation. It's a very important site historically, even before this building was built here. This building is an 1818 building, so they did a historic structures report to find out if the underpinnings were stable and what the status of the rest of the structure was before they actually undertook anything. Now we're in transition because we just wanted to get the community in and say thank you for putting up with us building this building. But there will be a show on the other side of the building, and it's on toys, buckets, and furnishings that were built by the bucket makers in Hingham. And we have some Please Touch, we have some interactives, we have some videos. It'll be lots of fun. That should be opening in a couple of weeks, and it's just a temporary thing now.
Well, we've been bucket makers before the colonial times. My family used to be able to produce 1,000 buckets a day, where it takes me 10 hours to make one bucket, so they really had everything down to a science. We used to load up the wagon 3 in the morning, make the trek into Boston, and sell to the highest bidder. What makes our buckets famous is we have a butt joint, and our buckets are cylinder shaped, so the bottom is a little bit fatter than the top, so that the next bucket of the same size will fit on the top of that bucket. They were great for shipping. They wouldn't tip over, so they were kind of locked together. I think it's what Hingham was pretty much founded on all over the world. Hingham is known as Bucket Town due to the massive export of buckets that were built by the 5 founding families here. They had the Wilders, the Burr buckets, Lane buckets, Tower buckets, and of course the Hersey buckets.
And then this gallery will be installed. We have a desk and bookcase that was given by a local family, the Gay family. And then there will be we have a lot of really important paintings and things. Those will all be installed. The archives will be installed upstairs, along with the textile collections.
Thank you for coming. This is perhaps one of the most thrilling days in the history of the Hingham Historical Society. It's fabulous that after so many people for so many years have worked and planned to bring this to fruition. And I first want to start by welcoming and introducing you to Alexandra Rollins. For those who haven't met her yet, she's our new executive director, and we look forward to her ideas, her activities to take us even further forward and therefore even more behind. Over the next couple of months, we'll have some meetings which will be discussion-focused groups, which you can meet with her, a sharing of ideas as we all collaborate to go forward. I want to say thank you to so many people, but we're just going to signal a few today. First to Jane Carr and Deirdre Anderson and the committee that put this wonderful program thoughtfully together. They've done a phenomenal job and much appreciated. And now this day really belongs to the project management team. Without the project management team, we would not be standing here and looking forward to the use of this building. So particularly, I want to thank Sally Weston as designer, Mark Cullings as project manager, for their extraordinary generosity, talent, and time deployment in making this project work. They were joined by Mike Studley, Peter Comrack, and formed a core, solid team for which we are grateful. I can't emphasize enough the generosity of Sally, Mark, Mike, Peter. No, wait, no, I'll get to that. I also want to thank Peter Brannigan, structural engineer, and Sean Papish, the landscape architect, who also generously donated their time and talents to make this building and its surround what it is and what it will continue to become. Deep and dearest thanks. There's no building without a challenge. And yes, we have had challenges. I think the challenges that we had to grapple with were scope, and with challenges of scope come financial obligation. And I think Hingham is an oasis of fertile ideas. So having people come together to agree, concur on what ought to be done was a particularly engaging challenge, but I think it also brought more plurality to the endeavor.
Big challenges were how do we maximize our parking for a facility like this and still get our ADA, our handicap parking in. Grading was a real challenge because we're on a hillside, so the parking lot itself had to be at a really minimal grade. Working on the ramp and working on the steps going into the building, those all had to be manageable. Also the terrace in the rear, we have a retaining wall there. We also need a little bit more slope protection in that area. So the original old granite steps were buried under that slope, and most people didn't even know they were there, so they got unearthed, like an archaeological dig, but we really couldn't build them back the way that they were. They really couldn't meet any codes. So another set of steps was done out front, the large granite steps, and they appear as though they maybe would have been there for a really long time. The involvement for us was that we were working with Sally and the rest of the project team for the outdoor areas, and that involved the parking, involved working on a terrace area that's in the rear. It also involved working on the stairs, the large stairs that are out going right down onto Main Street. Sally and I worked pretty closely on that.
I think our firm has done many historic house renovations in Hingham and around the South Shore. With a building like this, probably the most difficult thing is not, there are unknowns. The building was built into a hillside, so you don't know if there's going to be rot. Structural things. We had a great structural engineer. So we sort of designed the steps first. We got that sort of set. And then we designed the addition to the building. And it was really where you meld those two buildings that is probably the biggest challenge, because we literally opened up from one side to another, and you kind of have to temporarily support everything and make sure things don't fall down. We had Jim Gordon, who is a house building mover in town, another great person that came as soon as we called to kind of temporarily hold the building, the back of the building up, as we did tie the two buildings together. And that was probably the biggest challenge. The second biggest challenge was getting mechanical in these rooms, and you can see the ductwork that goes through on this second floor. On the first floor, we would be able to go below ground, but here we had to run to get heating and air conditioning because we want it climate controlled. We had to add these ducts. On the third floor, we had such attic space, we were able to come down from above, but those were probably the biggest challenges of the whole building, is to keep it, the main building, what everybody knows as Old Derby, to keep it as close to the original as possible.
Hingham is probably one of the most preserved historical towns in Massachusetts, and perhaps nationally as well. And Hingham, throughout the ages, has made enormous contributions to historical endeavors. the revolution, to craft in the colonies through its woodenware industry, through the shipyard in World War II, that there has been a tradition of preservation. There's been a civic pride of preservation and stewardship. And I think it was a historian, Santa Anna, who said, if you don't understand the past, you may be condemned to repeat it. So that's another reason to focus on the history of Hingham particularly and its role in the region.
The discussions and the negotiations and getting all of the pieces of the puzzle into play began in 2008. So we're 9 years into this. But here we are today welcoming the public in for the first time, and the feedback is very gratifying.
Hingham has just an incredible history, and I think for a place like this to be able to continue educating our children and just be able to know, bring people here to learn all the history that has happened.
It is fascinating to take some piece of data, take it further, elaborate, understand it, and share it. And it's interesting, it's humbling, and it's engaging, both as a researcher or a student of historical endeavors, and to disseminate it. And to be able to do that broadly as the president of the Society is a special pleasure.
Being a transplant from the Midwest, I came to New England because I love the New England architecture, and if we just need to keep educating all of us so we don't lose any of all the things that happened here from, when the settlers came through even World War II. And the shipyard is an amazing history that happened in our town, and I think a place like this will help continue that learning process. And we all learn every day. We learn something new, like that they used to hold town meeting on the 3rd floor of this building. I never knew that till I started working on it many, many years ago. And I think it just, again, adds vitality. And if you can make it exciting, then, kids want to learn, and older people want to learn, and they want to keep coming back to the building.
A lot of towns maybe don't document history the way that you do here in Hingham. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in Iowa, so some of the kind of old buildings are as old as the statehood out there, so it's a different planet when it really comes down to it. I think all the organizations here in town do a wonderful job of trying to preserve history and also try to preserve the history's place with all the residents and future residents.
This is a gem, a federal gem from around 1788 that was one of the first coeducational institutions in the colonies, and its features have largely been preserved, not all, but largely, so that you can see what the space was utilized as. Some of the appointments remain, and to have a building in this good a condition and so intact is distinctive.
And I hope that you participate in the discussions and help us make the changes the way you want it to happen. So thank you for coming today.